Do you know the best way to stain a fence? Because I tried a couple weeks ago and it really didn't turn out the best. So today we are gonna try a bunch of different methods to get the best application possible. 2 different methods of prep, 2 different methods of application, and then 2 different stain types to see what we like the best. Let's get started. I have a cedar fence, so I want to use a cedar color stain. So I have a full coverage and I also have a semi-transparent option. Then for application, I have 2 different methods here. I have a staining pad and a paintbrush and also a paint sprayer. Obviously the paint sprayer is gonna be a lot faster, but I'm thinking I'm gonna get better coverage with the brush. This is purely a hypothesis, so we're gonna test that out. Then the last 2 methods that I'm gonna have duke it out have to do with prep. I have this all-in-one wood cleaner from BEHR, and then I also have the handy dandy pressure washer. So we're gonna see which one of these does a better job, or maybe they both do a great job. It's giving that Gothic American painting. Let's get started. So that was pretty labor intensive, the scrubbing with the broom on the fence. I obviously have a super tall fence. I'm thinking maybe that cleaner might be better for floors. I think the pressure washer is gonna be the way to go for a fence, especially a fence that's this size. All right, so obviously I have to wait for it to dry, but I feel like where I used the all-in-one wood cleaner, it already looks brighter than where I just used the pressure washer. So I'm gonna be curious how these both dry. We'll have to wait until tomorrow until we actually do any of the stain applications, so see you tomorrow. We're back, it's day 2, and the good news is that both methods of cleaning totally worked. Over here we use the all-in-one wood cleaner, and I do think that it looks a little bit brighter than on the section where I just used the pressure washer. I think if you're doing a smaller area, using the all-in-one wood cleaner really makes sense because it is brighter. If you were doing a small deck, something like that, you get the all-in-one wood cleaner, you get a broom, you're good to go. If you're doing a massive area like this fence, I think a pressure washer is probably gonna be easier for you, just long term, because it's gonna go a little bit quicker. Using the broom to scrub is a lot of manual labor. I think using the pressure washer is a little bit easier. So I do think the all-in-one wood cleaner does give you a better look, but I think the pressure washer is gonna be easier. Obviously, we're gonna see what it looks like once we get the stain applications on to see which one really looks the best. But if I had to guess, the difference between the 2 is gonna be pretty minimal because they both look like they cleaned the wood pretty well. So how I'm gonna do it is I'm gonna segment out all of the different sections because remember we have 2 different stain applications and 2 different types of stain. We're gonna be applying with the paint sprayer and with the paintbrush, and then we're also gonna be applying 2 different types of stain, one semi-transparent and one full coverage, so we can really figure out what we like the best. Let's get into it. I just pulled back the tarp so I could get started staining, and look what I found. Look at this little guy. He was hiding underneath the tarp. He's like, ma'am, leave me alone. I'm hoping he'll hop away because I need to stain over here. So, be gone. The frog keeps hopping closer towards me. I don't know why he's not going the opposite direction. Maybe he like lives over there. What am I supposed to do with the frog? I hope he just hops away. Oh, frog! Next is the battle of the paint sprayer versus the brush. I have an exterior stain pad and a brush. I'm gonna try them both. They both attach to a long painting stick, so that'll be great. Then obviously the paint sprayer. I'm actually going to tape off this back here because I'm gonna get confused if I don't about what is what. So we're gonna tape it off and we're gonna label it. I lost visual on the toad for a second, but I just found him. It's somehow even scarier not knowing where he is than knowing where he is. Okay, so we're moving on to the brush portion where we're gonna be competing semi-transparent and full coverage against each other inadvertently because we're gonna start brushing. So I have it all labeled along semi-brush, semi-sprayer, blah, 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 blah. So we're gonna get started with semi-transparent for both. Let's do it. Where's the frog? Oh, he's in the grass, good. First test spot, done. I'm gonna move on to the next semi-transparent brush panel over on the paint sprayer side. Okay, I finished this semi-transparent brush, so now I'm gonna move on to the full coverage brush. I really love this cedar color. It looks really good on cedar. It just adds a lot of nice warmth to the project. We finished hand painting, and so now we are moving on to the paint sprayer. We're gonna do the semi-transparent sections first. This is nice because it gets all of the paint on, and doing it with the brush was actually really hard. I don't know why I struggled so much with that. But this is awesome because even if you get any overspray or drips, you can just go in with this stain pad and all of the paint is already there, so you can just push it into all the places. So this is working awesome. Ooh, full coverage in the sprayer is awesome. Way less drippy, way less runny, more like paint. Yeah, it looks really good. I really like the full coverage paint in the paint sprayer. The full coverage stain in the sprayer is way nice. I feel like the semi-transparent in the sprayer is a little drippier, but with the full coverage, you don't have to go back and paint over it at all. I really like that. The great fence stain testing experiment is officially over. Everything is dried, so now I can kind of walk you through what I think is the best way to apply stain to your fence. Before anyone has any opinions, this is a cedar fence. Your fence might be different if it's pine or anything else, but this is a cedar fence. That way we all know what we're talking about, okay? In terms of application, now that I have seen the all-in-one wood cleaner versus the pressure washing, I don't think there's that much of a difference once you get the stain on. So I think you're probably good to go either way. I think the one thing I will say is that I feel like where I pressure washed the fence, it got a little bit more chewed up. I did use the lowest PSI bit for my pressure washer, so I maybe should have gone to the store and got a lower bit. I feel like these boards look better. So I think that's something to take into account when you're considering how you're gonna prep your fence for stain. When I'm looking at color, I think I like the semi-transparent color more than I like the full coverage color. These are both the cedar color. I like more of the brown undertones. I think the full coverage cedar is coming across a little bit orange. However, I do notice where I painted versus where I sprayed, it's a lot more splotchy where I painted. This is the interior of my fence, so I have these stringers running here. It probably would have been better if I had done it on the other side because it's just one long board versus having the stringer, but I think that's helpful to know. When you're looking at brush versus paint sprayer, I'm gonna go with the paint sprayer. And then when I'm looking at stain, if I'm gonna use a paint sprayer, there's pros and cons to both. The semi-transparent stain does come out a bit waterier. So you are gonna get potentially some drips and you're gonna need to have a brush to kind of roll those in. Whereas the full coverage comes out a lot thicker and I didn't have to clean up any drips or streaks on the full coverage. So I think if full coverage is what you like, then I would go for that because coming out of the paint sprayer, it looked really, really good. And then you can also see on the full coverage here, I feel like you're getting more of the wood grain when you have the full coverage stain versus the brushed on stain. And I like the look of that. I like being able to see the wood species kind of come through. So I feel like the full coverage with the paint sprayer is a really good look if you can find the color that you like. Just from like a personal color preference, I think the semi-transparent looks a little bit better. So that's kind of what I would go with. So if I was to do my entire fence over again, I would do the pressure washer for prep because it's such a big space, so it goes a little bit faster. I would do the semi-transparent stain in cedar because I really like the look of that color. And then I would apply it with the paint sprayer, rolling over it either with a foam brush or a paint brush. That way I can get all of those drips and streaks out. But it's just easier to do it with a paint sprayer because getting all of that stain on the fence just using a brush is pretty difficult. You can definitely see over here that I missed some spots using the brush. So the paint sprayer application is much nicer. And then you can see here how when I use the brush with the full coverage, it goes on thicker. Whereas when I use the paint sprayer, you can see the wood grain through. Both of these panels were prepped with the pressure washer. Over here, you can see the brush application, the paint sprayer application, the brush application, the paint sprayer application. So you can see that the brush goes on thicker with the full coverage. I personally like the paint sprayer better with the full coverage. And then over here, I also think that the paint sprayer turned out better, but I did have to go over that with a foam brush to make it not splotchy because it went on super watery. Close up at the full coverage with the paint sprayer. on the pressure washed board. Close up of the full coverage brush on the pressure washed board. Close up of the semi-transparent stain on the pressure washed board with the paint sprayer. Close up of the semi-transparent stain put on with a brush on the pressure washed board. You can definitely see some spots here on the bottom that I missed. Here is the full coverage on the wood cleaner prepped panel applied with a paint sprayer. Here is the section with the full coverage stain put on with a brush, prepped with the cleaner. Here is the semi-transparent stain put on with the paint sprayer on the panel prepped with cleaner. Here is the semi-transparent stain section put on with a brush on the panel prepped with cleaner. There's a huge difference in the full coverage versus the semi-transparent, and I think that's just a personal preference. I think they both look great. If you have any questions about prep, stain, or application, go ahead and drop them in the comments, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching Perkins on Parkway.